file 53020, 53022, and 53021.
All right, thank you, Ms. Kudron. We're back on record and ready for Mr. Burke's next witness. We have all of our state parties and attorneys that rejoin us.
Your Honor, we call FBI Special Agent Corey Burras.
Could you spell that first, please?
COREYBURRAS. Right?
Okay, thank you.
You swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Just for the record, I always misspell his name. So
All right.
must have finally learned.
Well, you're a little far away. Was it a D or a P? Beginning of your last name?
B is
B as in
a boy.
boy.
Thank you. Okay, all right. Well, I'm glad I asked. Proceed well.
Please state your name for the record.
My name is Corey Burras.
And Mr. Burras, where are you employed?
I'm employed as a special agent with the Federal Bureau of Investigation in our Detroit field office.
And how long have you worked with the Federal Bureau of Investigation?
I've been with the FBI since May of 2002.
May of 2002. What did you do before May of 2002?
I was a corrections field supervisor for the state of Wisconsin.
What is that? What did you do as that?
Within the state of Wisconsin, I ran probation and parole offices for 2 separate units. I was also part of a sex offender review committee for all the sexually violent persons in the state of Wisconsin. So I was part of their assessment and review team.
And then you applied to the Federal Bureau of Investigation.
I had applied to the FBI in 1998.
Okay. And so you did you go to school in Quantico?
I did.
And what does that entail?
It's about 4 months of rigorous training, both legal, physical, mechanical, a lot of just the basic training that'd be required to have basic competence to become an agent in the field.
And you said you've worked there since 2002, was it?
Yes.
So about 23 years of experience with the FBI plus prior law enforcement experience. Yes. Are you familiar with the case of the Skelton children?
I am.
And how did you come into contact with this case, or how did you become knowledgeable about this case?
I was at the point I was assigned to our Ann Arbor resident agency, which does cover Lenawee and many other counties. I received notice that there's an Amber Alert, and I was ordered to report to Morenci, and I did report to Morenci on or about November 26th or the early morning of November 27th.
Okay.
2010.
So we had prior testimony that an Amber Alert went out sometime after 10 p.m. And what you're saying is you responded somewhere shortly after that. Is that accurate?
Yes, I responded to Morenci.
But you didn't look at your watch to say I stepped in.
Correct.
12:01 or 11:15.
Right.
Understood. So when this Amber Alert was issued, what were you informed of? Take your time. Take your time.
I was informed there were 3 missing children who were last in the custody of their father, John Skelton, that they failed to be returned to the mom at the pre-designated time. At that stage, I'd learned that he was in the hospital and the children were unaccounted for.
And did you then respond to 112 East Congress Street?
Yeah, I initially showed up to our command post. I think
Okay.
it was at the Morenci Police Department or the City Hall. I think they're combined. And I was assigned to stay in the Skelton residence as we were getting all the other resources available, get Michigan State Police, all their forensic people there. So I stayed in the house that first night.
So when you say you showed up to the command post, how many people are there? Who was there?
Initially, I was one of the first responders, so there was only a handful. I think Larry was there, or Chief Weeks was there. We had a couple FBI agents. I think our on-duty agent was there. And I showed up. I think a local police officer was there. There was not, by the time I showed up, there was not a large group of people.
And it became larger as you were there. Is that accurate?
Yeah, we within a day or two, we had 50 to 75 FBI agents, plus all of our personnel in command and specialties there.
Okay. Did you become aware of an incident in September of 2010 as part of this briefing when you showed up?
Yeah, I was informed that John Skelton had brought the 3 children from Renzi down to Florida without the consent of mom of Tanya Skelton. Yeah, we also learned through talking with Tanya that he was allowed to have visitation on certain days and times with the children, but the children were in the primary care of Ms. Skelton.
So he, in other words, John Skelton was exercising parenting time, visiting time.
Yes.
With children. Is that accurate?
Yes.
And was there a time when Tanya Skelton, or Tanya Zubers now, was interviewed by the FBI?
Yes, there was during the initial response.
And is that where you learned this information of what had transpired over the few months prior to the reason for the inquiry?
Yes.
As part of the investigation, the FBI, did they discover some accounts?
Yes, we started a robust investigation. Part of the initial findings, we're going through some email traffic, and we learned that John Skelton had created a Yahoo account. John Skelton, 1971 at yahoo.com. That was created on or about October 30th of 2010.
Okay. Was there another?
Yes, we learned another Yahoo account was created on or about November 6th of 2010 in the name of Joanne_Taylor at yahoo.com. It is interesting, the same IP address that was used to create the John Skelton Yahoo account was the same IP address that created Joanne Taylor.
What does that mean?
Functionally, it's the same internet connection. Presumably the same laptop was used to create both accounts.
Could you surmise from that John Skelton created those accounts?
Yes.
And then there was a preliminary cart forensic examination of Mr. Skelton's laptop. What did you discover there?
There's another email account that we learned called I'll spell EQCILDAAN at yahoo.com. And that email account was used to create a profile on a website at Cafe Mom.
Okay. And what is Cafe Mom?
I think it's more of a social media gathering for interested parents to discuss whatever parenting issues or is just general light commentary for parents.
Okay. Do you know the name of that account?
It was Mom Forever Young.
But not spelled correct.
Correct. His mom Forever Young was spelled YUNG.
And do you remember what date Mom Forever Young joined Cafe Mom?
November 6th, 2010.
And did that account have contact with, or did you learn that Tanya had a Cafe Mom account?
Yes, we learned, we set our investigation, subsequently determined that Tanya Skelton was crafty biker mom at Cafe Mom.
And did you find communication between Mom Forever Young and Crafty Biker Mom?
Yeah, on November 16th, Mom Forever Young sent an introductory message to Crafty Biker Mom on that forum.
And who did Mom Forever Young identify as?
Mom Forever Young identified herself as Joanne.
Is that a reference to Joanne Taylor?
Yes.
And did you also learn during these examinations on November 13th, there was some online searches done? What were those searches for?
We learned through our analysis that John Skelton's laptop was used to conduct online searches. Part of the searches included a search for potassium cyanide, the availability of prussic acid, is rat poison tasteless and odorless, can rat poison kill a person, is it odorless and tasteless? Those were the search terms.
What does that mean to you?
Definite interest in finding something that could harm or kill someone.
And then on November 19th, did you find, now this is all, I'm still referring to this the forensic examination of the digital devices. Did you learn of something that occurred on November 19th?
At 7:02, Mom Forever Young that left a message for Crafty Biker Mom on that Cafe Mom forum.
So Mom Forever Young is John Skelton.
Correct. Yes.
And Crafty Biker Mom is Tanya Zubers. Is that
Yes.
correct? And so you're saying on November 19th at 7:02, is that AM or PM?
AM.
7:02 AM, John Skelton sent a clandestine message. In other words, he was disguising himself as someone and sent a message to Tanya. Is that accurate?
Yes, he was pretending to be Joanne Taylor and sent a message to Tanya Zubers.
And then later that same day at 3:01, what did you find out?
At 3:01, Tanya responded and asked, pretty much, who are you? Tried to request, who are you? Why are you reaching out? And at the same day, the user said, hey, I'm Joanne Taylor.
This is the account that was created by John Skelton.
Yes.
Did this Mom Forever Young, did she give an explanation of how she knew John Skelton?
Yeah, at 4:33, a response was sent back to Tanya, identifying her name as Joanne Taylor, and described a background as to how she knew Tanya and how, in fact, Joanne Taylor knew and met John Skelton. And that description was laid out as they had car trouble. John decided to stop by, help them out, noticed that he had kids, was offering them food, helping them out quite a bit. And also noticed like a Cafe Mom sticker. So he realized there's a connection with Cafe Mom.
And this is all found out through this account created by John Skelton. Is that
Yes.
correct? Yes.
Yes.
Continuing on with this forensic examination, what about November 20th, 2010?
November 20th at 5:20, the analysis determined that Skelton's laptop was used to conduct an online search at Bing.com on how to break a neck. And then further, how can you break someone else's neck with your hands? That was accessed. Then from 5:29 to 5:45, the following searches were conducted: neck and spine, spinal cord, cerebellum, brain, and brainstem.
Okay. And then the next notable discovery would have been November 24th. What was that?
Skelton sent an email to his friend who was in North Carolina, advised his friend in North Carolina by saying, killing myself tonight, but right now I'm fine.
Through your investigation, when was the last time a non-family member saw the children?
Thursday at 2:30, the Thursday, November 25th, 2010 at 2:30.
Okay, so that would have been Thanksgiving Day.
Thanksgiving Day at 2:30 in the afternoon.
And to the best of your knowledge, he had visitation from November 24th through November 26th?
Right, he was scheduled to return the children at 3 o'clock.
On November 26th, so Black Friday.
Black Friday, yep, yes.
Did you learn of Tanya Zubers? Where was she located? Where was she at on Thanksgiving Day?
She was having Thanksgiving with her family, not in Morenci, in Hunkel, Ohio.
Did she inform law enforcement that she had ignored several calls and texts from John?
Yes, she did.
Because she was spending the holiday with her sisters, accurate?
Yes.
Was there a time that you learned that she being Tanya spoke with John?
Yes, they spoke later that day. When they finally connected, John had said that he was angry, that she wasn't responding to calls. He demanded, do you still love me? Is there a chance of reconciliation? She replied negatively that there was not. His reply is that she would never hear from him again, and then hung up the telephone.
Did you find out some information about a next door neighbor, Adam Johnson?
Yeah, Adam Johnson was a next door neighbor who on that Black Friday evening, right about 11:30 in the night, heard a car door slam from John Skelton's residence.
You said it was on Black Friday, but did you mean at the end of, it was right before Black Friday?
Yep, I'm sorry. Yes, the 25th.
So on 11:30 PM, Thanksgiving Day.
Yes.
Correct. I know the date changes at midnight, but
Yeah, well,
we want
yeah.
to keep the date straight if we can. On November 26th, between 1:10 AM and 1:41 AM, what did you find?
We learned that a message was created at that Cafe Mom address from Mom Forever Young to Crafty Bike Mom. So from John to Tanya, a message was created at that Cafe Mom website.
Okay.
It was not sent.
Okay. And then at 5 AM.
At 5 AM, neighbors had driven by this John's house and observed that his van was not in the driveway, and they're surprised that his van was gone.
But that was also the morning of Black Friday,
Yes.
which was not unusual back then to leave, correct?
Yeah,
The
I don't-
sales started.
Sure, yeah, I don't know if his pattern, but yes,
But it would also be a reason that there were witnesses out and about to even notice.
correct.
Now that draft, was it eventually sent to Tanya?
Yeah, the draft that was created earlier that day was sent out at 7:02 in the morning from Joanne Taylor, John Skelton to Tanya.
And what was there anything remarkable about it?
Yes, the text from that included, "Glad you won't have your boys to fondle or sleep with." And John just dropped his sons off with me, and I will be watching them until he returns.
So John Skelton sends a message to his wife at the time, Tanya, disguised as someone else, saying that John Skelton dropped the kids off to this disguise. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Now, as part of this forensic examination, did you also look at the movement of the cell phone?
Right, a separate examination of the cellular telephone was conducted by our cell phone specialists.
What'd you find out?
We learned that approximately 4:13 in the morning, his phone was at his house. And then approximately 4:29, the phone had moved from his house away 3.3 miles from his house.
And then,
Between 5:01 and 5:04, the phone continued to move to the vicinity of Lazy River Compound or Lazy River Campground located in Bridgewater Township in Williams County, Ohio.
and then what was the next?
At 6:46, the phone had returned to the vicinity of Skelton's residence.
Now, when we say Skelton's residence, we're talking about 112 Congress Street, Emergency, right?
Yes,
And so what you're telling the court is that at approximately 4:29 until 6:46, excuse me. His phone left his residence and traveled into Ohio and returned home. Is that accurate?
yes,
Now, were you also aware that John Skelton had parenting time visitation with his children during this time?
yes,
And to your knowledge, was there anyone else at that house during this time?
no,
So it would make sense that he either left the children at home alone or he took them with him.
yes.
What do you believe that?
I believe that's when the bodies were disposed.
At approximately 7:15 AM, what happened?
He was observed by one of his family members at the house of one of his nephews, Brian O'Brien's house.
And is that where Lisa Kern lived?
I believe so, yes.
And that would be John's aunt.
Yes, one of some of his family, yes.
And what happened there?
There are 3 winter coats that were dropped off at that residence.
And who did those winter coats belong to?
Andrew, Tanner, and Alexander.
Skelton.
Skelton.
Was it cold?
Yes,
So we're talking about Thanksgiving in Michigan.
Thanksgiving in Michigan is cold.
And John Skelton dropped off the boys' winter coats at 7:15 a.m. to his aunt.
Yes,
He also leave other belongings?
yes. He went to Kern's house and left some of his personal belongings, personal items, and advised her to make sure his mother gets this stuff.
Because he didn't need it.
Apparently not.
Were toothbrushes part of that? Children's toothbrushes?
Yes,
So the children didn't have their winter coats or their toothbrushes.
correct.
At 8:54 a.m. that morning, what did you find?
At 8:54, we went, our analysis from his computers. He used an online screen name of John Laser and sent a text message to an Alexander and Noreen, an internet associate, saying, "I'll be dead in 10 minutes," just letting people know.
At approximately 11 a.m., what happened that day?
Tanya reaches out for John and asks if he can pick the kids up at 1 o'clock. And then his response via text is that he and the children were with a friend north of Jackson, Michigan, and he'd be unable to return them any earlier. He continues, things are real complicated right now. I'm on the way to Fulton Hospital. I wasn't honest with you. I've been waiting for the boys to come home too.
So he tells Tanya at this point, he doesn't have the kids
Right,
and that he's on the way to the hospital,
right,
but we don't know why.
right.
Through your investigation, did you find out why?
Subsequently, we learned that he had hurt his ankle.
You know how he hurt his
I
ankle?
do not know how he hurt his ankle.
Do you know if he was attempting to commit suicide?
I'm sorry.
Do you know if he was attempting to commit suicide?
He reported that he was attempting suicide,
And that's how he hurt his ankle?
presumably.
Do you know when the last login to Mom Forever Young account was?
November 26th at 11:12.
Okay, so ever since that day, to your knowledge, and the updates of the search warrant, there's been no more activity from the account.
Right.
And that's the last time John Skelton would have had access to that account, is that right?
That's correct.
So at 1:21 in the afternoon on November 26th, what happened?
He called his aunt, Jennifer O'Brien, and asked for a ride to the hospital. Jennifer said she wasn't able to and referred her to Kelsey Borowski. She would be able to provide him a ride to the hospital.
And do you know if she took him there?
Yes, I believe Borowski brought him to the hospital for the ankle, for the injured ankle.
And was Borowski interviewed by the Michigan State Police?
Yes, Borowski was interviewed by the Michigan State Police as part of this investigation.
What did they learn?
Borowski told troopers that Skelton had told her that the children spent the prior night, Thanksgiving evening, at a friend's house, and that she had been upset with him.
And then at 3:30 that afternoon, what did you find? What did you learn?
At that stage, Morenci Police Department went to Skelton's house on Congress to conduct a welfare check. One of the officers entered the house for a welfare check.
What was found?
Upon entry, there was a spiral notebook with a 3-page handwritten suicide note. It was addressed, "Dear Tanya, love John. certain parts of the note that we learned from the investigation read, "You need to be strong now. Sorry, I hurt you yet again. This time it was on purpose and to kill my pain of losing you. I had no one here." That continues, "I guess my actions today will guarantee you won't have to see me again or in heaven. I pray God will forgive me, but I know it won't happen. May you find peace in the days to come. You will hate me forever, and I know this."
So this suicide note that you saw, you read, was written to Tanya.
Yes,
And I just want to go back through some of the things you just said. It stated that John was sorry, that he states, "I'm sorry to hurt you again, yet again, but this time it was on purpose." Is that right?
yes,
And he goes on to say, "I guess my actions today will guarantee you won't have to see me again or in heaven." Is that correct?
yes.
What do you take from all of that?
I think that was his passive admission,
Admission of what?
killing children.
And that part of that is he knows that Tanya can never forgive him for what he did.
Correct.
Last thing on that, "You will hate me forever, and I know this." Is that right? And any doubt in your mind what he was saying?
I have no doubt in my mind,
What was he saying?
Tanya, I killed the boys.
On November 27th, so this would be the next day, Mr. Skelton was interviewed at St. Vincent's Hospital by the Federal Bureau of Investigation.
Yes,
And I know you have reviewed part of that. You were part of that investigation. Could you tell the court what took place, what you learned from that?
we had two agents from our child abduction response deployment team had contact with John Skelton at the hospital, trying to determine the location whereabouts of the kids. At that stage, I believe they also had Pastor Galloway.
Who is
there.
Pastor Galloway?
I think it is the family pastor of the church, and I think she was helping them out, helping their relationship, their marriage out as well. She was with them. He was interviewed, provided Miranda at the hospital. And over the course of different interviews over that day and the next, he gave many statements to investigators.
Okay. So let's talk about some of those things that he said. Did he talk about Joanne Taylor?
Yes, he did. Initially, prior to talk about Joanne Taylor, he did recall with the investigators that Andrew Alexander and Tanner were in their pajamas the last time before they were taken from the house. Lowe's playing video games. That was about 9 o'clock, and other boys working on the puzzle. So, and about
So they weren't in their winter coats.
they were in their winter coats. They were in the house being kids,
They had on PJs.
right?
To the best of your knowledge and based on that investigation, that's what they were wearing.
That's what he told us.
Okay.
Yes. He ended up being very, very specific as to which pajamas they were in.
Okay.
He advised that he was confronted based on the preliminary information that was obtained, that we believe Joanne Taylor was fictional, that she didn't exist, that she was not part of this interaction, and that it looked like the person that he created in Cafe Mom was in fact him posing as Joanne Taylor. He said he understood and he did not deny that statement to investigators. He didn't contest that it was not him posing as Joanne Taylor.
Okay.
And then he also advised a week prior to this interview, he was online researching ways to commit suicide, perhaps by breaking his neck.
Okay.
he continued identifying Thursday, November 25th. On Thanksgiving, he recalled playing with the boys, helping them get into their pajamas. And that sometime after 9 o'clock, he wrapped them in blankets, giving each boy a stuffed animal. And then he placed them in his van, putting the younger boys in booster seats, and making sure they're all in the seatbelts. He said that Drew was dressed in brown pajama pants with an orange stripe on the side. Do not remember what type of top Andrew wore that night. Tanner was dressed in camouflage pants and Scooby-Doo shirt.
But he described them as.
He described, yes. He
Sleeping
described
clothes.
They're sleeping clothes, right?
Now, he didn't recall the stuffed animals,
Correct,
or which ones, which
Yeah, he
who
wasn't-
gave to what.
right. He wasn't certain what stuffed animals he did.
At some point, the Federal Bureau of Investigation advised him that based on the viewing the pings of the cell phone, the examination of cell phone towers, that he wasn't home.
Correct. They confronted him that he was approximately 20 miles southwest of his house, right about 5 o'clock in that morning. Skelton told the investigators that he did not recall leaving his home.
But then as this conversation continued, did he say that they may be in a schoolhouse?
Yes, he said, he indicated that he directed the investigators to go look in an old brick schoolhouse in Kunkel. He described the schoolhouse as a brick building with a chain link fence, pretty specific about it. He said it was deserted, but still open. He advised the history that he used to meet Tanya's sister there and exchange tomatoes, and that the family lived very close to that schoolhouse in Kunkel.
Okay. And do you know if that schoolhouse was searched?
Yes,
And
we deployed a team very quickly there.
so while this investigation while this interview is happening, there's a team searching the schoolhouse?
Right, we would get actionable intelligence and we had sent it out to investigators who would resolve that as quickly as they could.
So safe to say that there were a number of law enforcement officials working this case all at the same time.
There's a large number of investigators from many different jurisdictions and agencies, and a large response to this Kunkel school.
Okay. And so nothing was found at the school.
Correct.
And then was he confronted with that information?
Yes, he was confronted, and then he provided a separate place to look.
And what was that?
Well, the story that he brought up was that he had a nightmare that scared him, and he envisioned that he was standing in Holiday City, Ohio,
Okay.
on Highway 15. He is across the street, described a nice hotel where he had stayed with Tanya in the past, had good memories about that event. He further directed investigators to a dumpster that was adjacent or immediate area of this hotel. It was next to a mom and pop restaurant.
Okay.
And he advised agents that there was a light there about it. I think he drew a map or was provided some sort of reference and put an X on the spot that agents should go searching for the boys in the dumpster. He was encouraging investigators to leave now and go check that dumpster.
To the point he actually shoved one, right?
Yeah, he had physical contact with one of the agents to compel her to go search that site.
Did he continue on to talk about Joanne Taylor being there?
Yes, Joanne Taylor came back in, and that during his dream, he described having tunnel vision and seeing that he saw his van pull up next to the dumpster, and then he saw Joanne Taylor there and saw Joanne Taylor get out of his car. And he was concerned that if it was Joanne Taylor, is actually him getting out of the car.
So he was, not my words, I want you to use your words, but what I'm understanding is he tells the investigators that he may be Joanne Taylor.
In effect, yes, yes. He said that if the person getting out of the car was Joanne Taylor, that would be him.
And in fact, doesn't he say that I need you to go search this dumpster to find out if I'm a child killer?
Yes, he was concerned that people could construe him as being a monster or to have murdered his children.
Now, did the FBI send out their emergency response team in conjunction with this dumpster and subsequently the landfill?
Yes, we conducted an investigation. By the time we showed up at the dumpster was empty. So we conducted an investigation as to what company would pick that up and where it would go. We identified the company who picked it up, and they're very specific about where that the contents of those dumpsters were placed in the landfill. So as a result, we had specific instructions. Our evidence response team went to that specific site and engaged in a physical search of that area with negative results.
And when you say conducted a search, was it a cursory search?
No, it was a very thorough search.
Okay. And nothing was found?
Nothing of relevance to this matter was found.
Now, towards the end of that interview. I'm going to refer you to one of the reports based out of that interview. But in the report, it talks about when Skelton is recounting his dream and he talks about Joanne. What's his physical reaction?
He had a strong physical reaction. He began to cry heavily and hyperventilate.
And this is during the time where he's questioning if he is Joanne Taylor.
Yes, yes. He said he got hot, his chest hurt. He just had a very strong visceral response when brought back to that dream and his debate whether or not he was Joanne Taylor.
And he was insistent that the boys were in that dumpster.
Absolutely.
I think you may have already spoke to this, but one of the questions that he had for agents was about whether he was a monster. Can you talk about that?
Yes, he brought up going to the dumpster, said that is where you're going to find the stuff, meaning the boys. You're going to find the boys there. The boys got to be there. The boys are not in an open field, is what he told investigators. He offered that he was 95% sure that the boys were in the dumpster. And that's when he started to cry, had that visceral response, directed one of the agents to leave and go find my boys. And the concern turned to that he needed to find out if he was a monster. That's what he told the investigators, that if they found the boys, everybody would think he is a child killer and a murderer.
So everything that you learned from this interview, does it suggest to you that he killed the children?
Absolutely.
When I say he, I mean John Skelton.
Yes.
Any doubt in your mind he killed these
No
children?
doubt in my mind.
So he was also confronted during this interview about the fact that he took their coats and toothbrushes to two of his aunts. What was his reaction to that?
His reaction, he took the items to his aunt's home because they did not need them anymore.
And when he said that they did not need them anymore, did he provide any plausible explanation of them being alive and needing anything like that?
November in Michigan, you always need a jacket. Your kids, you always need to brush your teeth.
Was he speaking of the children as if they were deceased to them?
I don't specifically recall.
Now, he talked about when he returned home after dropping the stuff off at his aunt's. So he dropped off the coats, the toothbrushes, and the laptop, several things. And he talks about going home. What did he talk about doing when he went home?
Committing suicide.
Okay. And did he talk about how?
He was debating using a knife or jumping off the roof of his house. He decided that instead he'd bind his hands and feet with pieces of tie-down strap and jump off the second floor banister from a noose that was located at the house.
Okay. Now, you said the first night that you got involved in this, part of your personal responsibility was to go to that house.
Yes,
And when I say that house, I'm talking about 112 Congress Street.
yes,
Did you go there?
yes.
What did you observe inside that house?
It was destroyed. Personal items, a big cabinet was knocked over, dishes broken, cords, extension cords, cords to the TV were cut, car keys were cut. A significant amount of disarray. It's like something had exploded in the house. We noticed a noose was hanging from the second floor, from the upstairs. It was tied around the banister and hanging. That you could see it from the first floor when looking up the staircase.
Okay.
The house was in significant disarray.
You remember the master bedroom?
The master bedroom was upstairs, again in significant disarray. I observed that the mattress was full. There was a larger mattress that was shredded. It appeared as though a knife had been put in the mattress and pulled down in many slices.
Just repeatedly?
Repeatedly, yes.
So destroyed.
Destroyed, unusable ever again.
So this is consistent. What you saw is consistent with this interview of what he said he was going to do.
Yes.
Now, at the end of this interview, why did the interview finally end? Or how?
The interview ended when he requested an attorney, so the interview ended thereafter.
Was that the last interview that he gave without an attorney? To your knowledge?
To my knowledge, yes.
And just for reference, I'm back to page 12. Physicians and staff at Fulton County Health Center. Were they talked to?
Yeah, the physicians and staff were helpful while they were still triaging and trying to, they knew what we were doing. They were trying to help us locate children. They provided statements. They told us what he had told them.
Okay.
And there are differing versions, nothing that we could act upon.
But some of the stuff that he was telling them had to do with how he was going to commit suicide. Is that right?
Yes,
And that's important because when you're treating someone, it's important to know why you're treating someone, right?
yes.
What did you learn from those stories? Were they all similar?
No,
Were
they're
they-
disorganized. There's no consistency to the stories that he is providing medical staff. There's nothing that we could do that we could use to help locate these children.
So fair to say, the one thing you did learn is that John Skelton is a liar.
That was clear.
Now, he was eventually transferred from Fulton County to a crisis center.
Yes,
And that would be, and he also was admitted to St. Vincent's Hospital. Right?
yes,
And did you try to speak to their staff?
yes. We were unable to gain any information from that staff.
In fact, they were unwilling to be interviewed.
Correct.
Now, further, there were search warrants done. Let's talk about search warrant of the Skelton's residence. I know we don't have to go in, if you've already talked about it, don't go into complete detail, but that search warrant, you were actually in the house, so you saw all this stuff and we talked about the news. And where was Skelton's vehicle?
It was parked next to his house.
So when you get there, the van that John Skelton drove was at the house.
Yes.
What was inside the van?
Nothing of any significance.
Except were the children's booster seats in
The booster seats were in.
there? Okay, so you're a law enforcement officer in Michigan. Children of a certain age, are they required to be in a booster seat?
Yes.
If you were going to turn your children over to someone to drive them, would you provide them a booster seat?
Yes.
Where were the booster seats?
In the back seat, in the van.
So winter coats are at aunt's house, toothbrushes are at aunt's house. Kids are only in PJs somewhere, according to his statements. And the booster seats to transport the children are still inside the van.
Yes, and their asthma medicine and nebulizer were still in the house.
So the children took asthma medication,
Yes.
and during this search, you found,
It was located in the house. Yes.
and what's a nebulizer?
I believe it helps clear the lungs out during, leading up to an asthma attack.
And so all that stuff was still in the house.
Yes.
So if by chance any of this story could have been true, obviously medicine would have been taken with the children,
Yes.
you would suppose. Now, as part of these search warrants, there were also more internet history. I think we've already talked about the potassium cyanide, prussic acid, and rat poisoning, but that was all discovered again through search warrants, correct?
Correct.
There was also a search warrant for the Skelton MySpace. Familiar with that? Owens does it. Also, I'm at the bottom of page 14.
Yeah, there's a large. The search warrants were extensive.
Okay. That is where we discovered, or excuse me, where you discovered that all of the accounts had been created from the same IP address.
Yes.
And that was consistent with Congress Street in Morenci, Michigan.
Yes.
So I'm going to move you forward to November 26th, around midnight. I'm on page 16. And there was a time where Pastor Galloway drove to the Fulton County Health Center and spoke directly with John Skelton. You familiar with that?
I do. I am.
And what happened?
During the course, Pastor Galloway had contact with John Skelton many times, and she provided that information to us. At approximately 9 o'clock, John Skelton told Galloway that Joanne had picked up the boys on Friday, November 26th, between 10 and 11 a.m. In the morning. He believed Joanne's last name was Taylor, and that Joanne had visited his home previously.
Okay.
And that the next day she had shown up between 10 and 11 and picked the boys up.
Okay.
That's what he told Galloway. Later on, at about midnight, when she had contact with John again, he was pretty upset and told Pastor Galloway that I miss them so much. And Pastor Galloway asked, where are they? He said, they're home. They're at home. She pressed, and that she spoke to Galloway or John Skelton again, and said he told her on the 27th that nobody believes me. They think I made up Joanne, that she's in my head. Seeking for clarification when Joanne picked the boys up, Galloway asked, so the boys didn't go with Joanne in the morning Friday. Skelton told her that the boys went with Joanne Thursday night.
So that would have been Thanksgiving night.
Yes.
Okay.
Galloway asked directly where he took the boys, and he replied, home. I sent them home. Don't you understand? I sent them home.
What does that statement mean to you?
That he sent them to heaven.
Mark Pilbeam was then interviewed by the FBI. Did you learn from?
Confirmed that they were friends, and we confirmed that that equidan@yahoo.com was John Skelton's email account.
So one of the emails that you discovered that was created from the same IP address, you confirmed was in fact John.
Yes,
Okay, and that would have been his public email that he used with friends or whatever.
this is well known to be his email address that he used to contact Bill.
Now, further, did Pilbeam say anything about Skelton talking to him about not being able to have the kids?
Yeah, he recalled that John told them, if I can't have the kids, then she'll never have the kids either.
And do you understand that to mean she being Tanya Zubers?
Yes. And then he followed up by saying that he would take the boys from Tanya as he did before when they traveled to Florida in September 2010.
And then was Sandra Aarons interviewed?
She was interviewed, and we learned that she was John Skelton's aunt.
Okay.
And leading up, during the interview, she recalled that they had many conversations and his interest in committing suicide. And then he also had very graphic comments about killing Tanya.
Back to the search of the residence. Could you go through the things that were found? And you don't have to go into extreme detail, but what was found in the search of the home? A rose, I think there was a rose.
Yeah, there was, I recall a rose that was attached to the wall with a written statement. This is the rose that my first rose that Tanya had ever given me. That was, I think, affixed to the wall in some manner. I don't recall.
Was there also one about the last rose?
Yeah, in the last rose, there was also one, I think, that was affixed to the wall.
And this china cabinet that you described, what was inside of it?
Nothing was, but it was already knocked over. All the contents were strewn about. And it looked like everything had been destroyed.
Now, were you aware that there was a large search party put together, which lasted multiple days? Are you aware of that?
Yes.
And this consisted of fire departments and volunteers.
Yes.
Do you know what they searched? Where they searched?
Yeah, there were maps that were placed up in the command post. Those maps, and they just did a targeted area for places they would search, primarily based on the cell phone, the location, or if there's any actionable intelligence that we could work based on the interviews with John, such as Kunkel or other places that he said they would be. We had dispatched people out there, but there was a separate auxiliary of people that would search lakes, areas of land that were arranged by private citizens or private organizations. I believe I can't remember the name of the official, some police chief, fire chiefs also assisted in directing those land searches.
Were there also water searches?
There was also water searches as well. And that was via the City of Toledo Fire and Rescue. I think they had the most availability. And there were a number of locations of places that they had searched in the water.
So I know they'd searched a couple of lakes, but they'd also searched that Lazy River campground area. Is that right?
Yes.
Including what was determined to be an unnamed lake, this whole body of water that was on that campground was searched.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes.
So I know you worked this case from November 26th, and I assume you kept up with it as it's going on, is that correct?
That is,
So it's been almost 15 years since this happened. Is there any doubt in your mind what happened to those children?
I have no doubt in my mind
What
that
do you
John
think?
Skelton killed Andrew Tanner and Alexander Skelton.
Is there any doubt in your mind that it happened on or about November 26, 2010?
No doubt in my mind.
I have no further questions at this time.
Questions? Yes.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
You testified to being involved in the case almost immediately after that Amber Alert had went out on, I believe it was November 26th of 2010. But can you tell us whether you are actively still involved in the investigation, or at what point did you stop being involved in the investigation?
I don't have the exact date, but there was a formal transition of case management and OIC responsibility to the Michigan State Police. I don't know the exact time, but Michigan State Police has been the primary responding agency.
Okay. And when you were still involved in the investigation, were there any calls from the public regarding any tips of the children being seen or anything like that?
Yes, there's a significant response. We had a database set up, Rapid Start, I think is what it was called, might have been called CMC, where all the intake would be received, typed and assigned and resolved. So towards the latter part of the Bureau's investigation, we had an agreement with the state police that we would cover all matters outside the state of Michigan, just based on our resources and our reach, where the Michigan State Police would resolve any in-state tips.
Okay, so based on the tips then that the FBI would have been responsible for, so outside of the state of Michigan, were there any tips that came in that led to any significant searches with regards to those tips?
No significant searches outside the state of Michigan. I think primarily we were doing interviews, just running information down, but
Okay.
nothing significant.
Do you believe there were any credible tips that came in outside of the state of Michigan that you or the FBI were involved in?
I believe the callers believe them to be credible to their situation, but as it relates specifically to the Skelton matter, there has not been a solid investigative tip that leads us to a solid disposition in this case.
Okay, based on just the media and things that, you know, pop up on the internet, it appears that there were allegedly some calls that came in Sandusky, Ohio, regarding a sighting of the boys with a lady. Do you recall that?
We've had a number of tips. I vaguely recall tips that came out of Sandusky.
Okay, and can you give examples of what types of things the FBI would do to actually look into those tips?
As it relates to Sandusky, if my memory is correct, I believe there's a lady that was seen with two or three children that resembled the Skelton kids at a cafe. Typically, we would resolve those by going to the cafe, the restaurant, to the venue, having contact with the manager, taking a look at any video, any other available information that we could via interview waitresses, managers, that sort of.
Okay. Are you aware of if Tanya Zubers was at any point considered a suspect in this matter?
I was never aware that she was, I'm not aware she's ever considered a suspect in this matter.
Okay. Are you aware of any other people other than John Skelton that have been considered a suspect or maybe still are considered a suspect?
Not in the investigative, in the tips, everybody says this guy did it, that guy did it, but those have never been founded. It's our position within the FBI that it's my opinion that he is the only subject in this matter.
Okay. You testified a little bit about John Skelton and the alleged suicide attempt that occurred on November 26th of 2010. And I believe when you were testifying to it, you were asked a question about it and you said reportedly. So can you, I guess, elaborate on that and whether you believe the suicide attempt was an actual attempt or maybe was it a cover up, or what are your thoughts on that?
My thoughts on the suicide, there was no evidence indicative that he attempted to hang himself or stab himself. The only damage that he reported to have was damage to his ankle, which he went to the medical center. And I don't know if that's a result from falling off a ladder, burying anything, or falling off a banister. I don't know. There's no information for me to believe the source or how that occurred.
Okay, and you testified that he allegedly did this with a noose. What was that noose made out of?
The noose I recall was a thinner cord, light tan in color, maybe ½ inch thick. Is long. I remember seeing the picture, but it was more of a, not a, it was just more of a cord.
Okay. Can you describe John Skelton's demeanor when you had contact with him personally around the time of November 26, 2010?
I had not had contact with him during that time. It was always our child abduction response team, special agents or troopers that would have that immediate response. I showed up, he was already in a medical facility, so I didn't have contact with him.
Okay, were you made aware of anything by those people that did actually have contact with him regarding his demeanor that was significant or stood out?
Yeah, during the interviews, he is pretty emotional. And just like, as I noted before, when we brought up the idea that he thought he was, you expected that he was Joanne Taylor, he had that visceral response of the heart was beating very heavily, and he had a very strong emotional response via crying and breathing. And that information was provided to us.
Okay, and based on that response, in your professional opinion, based on your trainings and your time with the FBI, is that a consistent reaction, or I guess a typical reaction for somebody whose children allegedly are somewhere they don't know where they're at?
I think there's a myriad of emotional responses. If my kids are missing, I'm going to be very emotional. I'm going to have a very visceral response. So I don't think that made it any more special. His response to either allegations of him killing his kids or just not knowing where they're at. He's very emotional.
Okay, and I know you already testified to the mattress in John's bedroom from when the search was conducted around November 26th, but was there anything about the children's room that stood out to you or was of significance?
I just recall the mattresses were on the floor. One of the mattresses did not have a sheet. It wasn't orderly. There was a bunch of toys and stuff all over. I believe from the master bedroom or the first floor, second floor, main bedroom where the bed was sliced up. The bedroom to the left had 2 on the floor. It was just a mattress and sheets on top of it. It was just complete disarray.
Okay, and are you aware of if the time that John was interviewed by the FBI, if John ever made any statements or gave any indication of why the house looked the way it did?
I don't specifically recall.
Okay. If you know, or if you can answer this, and based on your professional opinion and experience, do you have any ideas of why the house would have looked the way it did?
My experience or my training, I would imagine after such an event, that there's a lot of anger. And I do recall that John, when he cut up the keys, he wanted to make sure Tanny couldn't get anything back. Any of her private personal items in the house were destroyed. And there'd be no value to anything in the house that perhaps Tanny could take and use.
Was there anything that was visibly destroyed or damaged that belonged to the children within the home?
I don't recall.
Okay. You testified to the data showing that John's phone had been moving from Morenci to parts of Ohio and then back to Michigan in the early hours of November 26th. Do you believe that John was the person that was actually traveling with that phone at that point in time?
Yes.
Okay. And has there ever been any evidence that has been discovered that would suggest that anyone else was involved in whatever happened during the events on November 26, 2010, other than John Skelton?
No new evidence.
You testified about the dumpster that John alleged he put the boys in Kunkel, Ohio, and that there were searches there. Do you recall how extensive the searches were around that specific area?
Yeah, we had a good team that took off pretty quickly down there. I believe it's also supplemented with cadaver dogs, trying to pick up the potential cadaver odors or remnants thereof. And there was not a positive hit there. There was no indication of a body. or things that cadaver dogs would locate.
Okay. Do you know if cadaver dogs were ever used to search the van?
I do not know.
Okay. Did you ever personally go to Holiday City, Ohio while those searches were ongoing?
No.
Okay. And you testified that it was both law enforcement as well as people from the public helping with those searches in Holiday City, Ohio, correct?
Not in Holiday City, Ohio. There was a group, I believe, in North Carolina that were specifically trained in doing some grid searches in open fields and different sorts. That wasn't an immediate response to the incident. That was subsequent searches after things got controlled a little bit.
Okay. And you testified earlier to John making a statement that he was adamant that the boys had been in a dumpster and that they were not in any open fields. Did his comment regarding specifically them not being in open fields, did that stand out to you at all?
It did, and that just came from later on investigation in the steps. We utilized the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. They're a national organization that helps us in many different sorts of crimes against children. And we learned kind of the profiling angle, or at least what, like when parents kill their children, the manners in which they would kill their children or where they dispose of these. So it was, looking back now, typically parents aren't going to leave their children laying out in the middle of the woods. They're going to take other certain steps to try to protect them in their mindset. It's what I learned from Nick Mick and one of the profilers.
Okay. You testified about those internet searches that John Skelton had done on the computer prior to the boys last being seen, which involved searches with rat poisoning and whether it could kill. Was the home search to see if there was any rat poisoning within the home?
Yes, we looked for every possible cause or the ability to kill.
Okay, and no rat poisoning was ever found?
No.
Okay. Was it looked into of whether John had purchased any anything significant that was, you know, suspicious or I guess stood out around the time of November 2010?
Yeah, a financial investigation was conducted as well to try to track where he's been, gas, maybe bought wherever. It was noted the funds were depleted or at a negative balance, so there was no financial information that we obtained from a review of his finances leading up to the incident offense.
Did John Skelton ever give a reason for stating that he wrapped the boys in blankets while they were allegedly in their pajamas with those stuffed animals and putting them in the van?
He just provided the information that that's what he did. He didn't provide why.
Okay. I know that the three boys obviously were last seen in 2010, and we've had significant advances in technology since then, but were there any street cameras or anything like that that were available to be searched at that point in time?
It's an offense. I do recall that there's a gas station maybe at the main intersection of Morenci or in that southwesterly direction that we did research, and we did not find any information that would be of value.
Okay. You mentioned very graphic comments being made by John regarding killing Tanya. Can you give a bit more detail about that and whether it had any significance in the searches and how those were performed with the children?
No, the information came after everything calmed down in the searches. He was a tertiary interview contacts, so we interviewed him later. I think it was Pilbeam or whoever. He provided here's some historical information about what we talked about. So we didn't have that information at the time that all the events were going on.
Okay. How long after you became involved in the investigation did you believe or determine in your mind that the children were deceased and were not missing?
Probably in the first 72 hours.
Okay. Do you know if that was the same opinion and about the same time frame as the other investigators from the FBI?
I don't know. I didn't ask. I don't know. I think my perspective was different. I was managing a case. So as like a hub of information, kicking leads out and analyzing information in setting people out. So I had a lot better flow of information. They would almost come to me, Chief Weeks, one of the, we had a senior agent with me as well, and even some MSP detectives that were working with us. So I think our perspectives were probably different because many of our people were just assigned, go out here, do that, go out here, do that. So I don't know if their opinions, what I didn't ask, and I don't know if they would have an opinion based on what their role was.
Okay. Are you aware if the children had passports at the time that they had last been seen?
I don't know if that they had passports.
Okay. Do you think it's possible, based on all of the evidence that you're aware of, that these children are out there in a different country somewhere, or, you know, maybe in the United States somewhere, just not being found?
I think their bodies are someplace in this area. I don't think they're anywhere else but in this general area.
Okay. Is there anything else that you have not already testified to today with regards to the children being deceased that you wish to testify to or that you think is helpful?
No, I think you have been thorough.
Okay. I have nothing further. Thank you.
Did you say at one point, excuse me, that John and Tanya had a conversation that you reviewed on the night of the 26th?
I believe that was a text conversation about her asking to get the boys back. Or could have been, he was upset that she wasn't responding to his calls while she was at Thanksgiving. And it was later that night in which they had a text or phone conversation. He was upset with her and that I believe I look back, but you won't ever see me again or something to that effect. I don't know if that's telephonic, talking or texting.
Thank you. All right, any redirect, Mr. Castleberry?
No, you're on.
Any other questions, Ms. Stay?
No, thank you.
Any reason we should not thank and excuse our witness? Okay, thank you so much for your time and your testimony and your efforts in the case. Pass that along to Mr. Weeks too, please.
Thank you.
All right, at this time, we're going to take a break for lunch. See you back here at 1:30 to resume our proceedings for the afternoon. All right.